Tuesday, November 26th, 2024. The week of Thanksgiving, also known as the 1 week of the year where things revert to the price they probably should be now that we went from just Black Friday to Black Friday and Cyber Monday to now it's just this whole week-long thing, which I'm not opposed to. I would say if there's anything in society that I thought was headed for the absolute worst of outcomes, it was Black Friday, just as a whole. I remember about 10 years ago when it was a foregone conclusion that there would be all kinds of tramplings and people getting run over and beaten to death in Best Buy parking lots and stuff. And I gotta say, societally, we've come around to act a little more civil. I think part of it's the alleviating of the pressure of it being 1 day to 2 days. Now it's a week, despite the fact that, all signs point towards it getting much, much worse over time. It's actually gotten better. Big week for those who are into electronics, especially TVs and gaming. I haven't gone crazy with the cashing in on that, but I did manage to pick up the new NHL game for PS5 this year, which I refused to pay full price for. And right now they have that and many others for half off. And I got to say, it's a better game than it has been the last few years. Not quite its heyday, though it's probably one of the better sports games out right now. I have fond memories of the late 2000s and NHL parties at my house in the basement where we would all play, and we had to play as randoms to spice it up. You couldn't play as your team unless you got them as a random. And I remember one of the first years we played, the legendary Jim Hughson was the play-by-play guy. And he's got one of those voices where if you've heard it once, you'll hear it again 1,000 times over in your head. And not being that good at it, I had to outsmart guys who were good at it and knew hockey much, much better than I did. So anytime I was the Canucks, who ironically happened to be the team he worked for in real life, I would perform what would probably considered, it'd be considered in modern day times as psychological torture by taking advantage of the fact that it's a video game, so these lines are pre-recorded, and the best players on the Canucks at the time were the Sedin twins. There was something about the way Jim Hughson would say the Sedin last name that would just drive people nuts if it just was over and over and over. And I would frustrate people by just incessantly passing it back and forth between the two while they were on the ice. So all anyone heard in that basement anytime I played as the Canucks was Sedin, over to Sedin, back to Sedin, up the boards to Sedin, over again to Sedin. Sedin shoots, scores. And usually halfway through the first period, everyone there was ready to fight me, and I don't totally blame them for that. When Houston's time expired with EA, they moved on to Gary Thorne, which I don't know if he had any specific calls that we really latched onto in that game, but we did enjoy thoroughly calling back to the TV Gare as if we were talking to him specifically right then and there. So we did enjoy doing that for quite a while. And then I would say the last of them, while we would still play as a group, was the legendary Doc Emmerich, which was awesome. he pulled no punches when he would do the audio for that game as opposed to real life. And in real life, he was one of the best ever in all of sports. So him, it was just fun to enjoy that guy at his best, not necessarily just annoy the hell out of each other with a handful of lines that you could get the announcer to say over and over and over while everyone had to listen to it. Side note, I finished last night by watching Juice. It's kind of a random choice, but I usually watch it about once a year, and every year I always forget how much of a psychopath Tupac is in that movie. Omar Epps is great in it too, but Tupac is just terrifying in that movie. I would say in terms of movie villains of the 90s, he's for a non-horror film especially, that one Bishop from Juice is way up there for most intimidating villains, which is amazing too because his stature in the movie is smaller or the same size as everyone else. He never shares the screen with someone who's smaller than he is, and yet every time he's on the screen, he feels 9 feet tall, and he just makes your skin crawl in that one. That is a underrated classic from the 90s. Another one I'll have to get to though before the weekends, without a doubt, is the Thanksgiving film. That one is Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Very rarely does a film just hold court over a holiday by itself and just own the cinema portion of that holiday all alone without even a close second. But Planes, Trains, and Automobiles and Thanksgiving, those two are just, that is a marriage that will probably never be broken. The film is already, it was released in 87, so 13 and 24, 37. It's going on 4 decades old, and it doesn't even have a challenger yet. So I think that's a safe bet. If you've ever traveled on or near the holidays, doesn't even matter which holiday, any holiday, especially by air, that film will strike a chord with you. And it's amazing how it's undoubtedly a comedy, but it transcends genres because there's so much about it that just sticks with you once you've seen that once. And John Candy and Steve Martin just put on the performance of a lifetime simultaneously. And it is amazing how that one, it's another one where neither one of them felt like they were acting, or you didn't feel like you were watching them act. It just felt like two guys where one of them was just at the end of his wit and the other just is completely oblivious to it all. And I think almost everyone watching it too could relate to one or the other or know someone who is just like one or the other. And that one, I make sure I make it a point to watch that one during this week every year. So I think that's how I'll end tonight, which I guess accidentally would put me on an unintentional John Hughes kick. And that would not be the first time. I can't help but wonder if we'll ever see a generational run like that from a director. The guy has just an endless list of classics, but he pretty much dominated the 1980s in terms of cinema and meshing into culture. Talking about the same guy who did the Vacation series, The Breakfast Club, Pretty in Pink, Weird Science, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, The Great Outdoors, and Uncle Buck. Uh, that's tough to top, especially in a 10-year stretch. Not that he really fell off ever. You know, 101 Dalmatians is a classic. Miracle on 34th Street, Home Alone series. But him in the 80s are just synonymous. Uh, Definitely going to watch more of his stuff in the coming weeks. But this week, yeah, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is a must, and Uncle Buck is never a bad idea.